Hi, kids. Welcome to Miss Nancy's Bible College for Kids. I'm glad you're tuned in. Today is the finale of the book of Esther. I'm so glad we went through this whole book, and Miss Nancy got excited, you know me. And one time I think I forgot to read the part where it was Mordecai that got to ride through the streets with the king's raiment and all that, and I think I did not make that clear, but Haman himself had to do it. But now we're going to get on to today's lesson. It's called 10 More Hangings and a Slaughter. But it's not the slaughter you would think. So let's get started. In the book of Esther, the Old Testament, chapters 9 and 10. In the 12th month, that's the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put into execution. Now, at this point, it was still about the Jews throughout the 127 provinces. But when it drew near to be executed, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, here's what God does. Though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. God does it so many times in the Bible. If people are complaining, He will turn it around on them. If they're dependent on something else, He will turn that around. Just like in today's world, it seems like He punishes us with the things that we do wrong, and it goes the opposite way. He's a wonderful God. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. In other words, they're retaliating and going against the people that was going to try to kill them. And no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell on all the people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants and the deputies, and officers of the kings, helped the Jews, and here's why. Because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Mordecai was made second to reign in the kingdom. First King Ahasuerus, then Mordecai. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out through all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And guys, Israel's in another battle. The Jews are getting gone against right now, and God's on their side, and they're going to be all right. And in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. That's in the palace only. And it goes down and it lists these 10 names, and Miss Nancy would butcher them anyway, but we're going to drop on down to verse 10, and here's who those 10 people was. The 10 sons of Haman, remember him? He's the one brought all this. Of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil, in other words, all the riches, their clothing, apparel, all that stuff, they didn't even touch. They laid not their hand. On that day, the number of those that was slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace. And the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? So he gave them all this power last lesson, remember, and they went out and killed him. But anyway, he's saying, here's what's happened in the palace, what's happened out there. Now, what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done? Remember, before he's had limits on what she can do. He says up to the half of the kingdom. Now he loves her so much, and he's figured it out, and he said, what do you want, queen? It'll be done. And then here's what Esther said. If it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's sons, 10 sons, be hanged upon the gallows. Well, it just said that they got killed, so Miss Nancy's kind of pondering this part, but we'll just go on. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's sons his 10 sons. So evidently, it was just to show people because it just said that they had killed them. So let's go on. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces, remember 127, gathered themselves together and stood for their lives. In other words, they got to stand up for themselves, just like the Jews are doing now, just like Israel is. And had rest, they stood for their lives and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes, get this kids, 75,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of, what do you think, kids? Feasting. Remember, these people love to eat, and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan, they assembled together, and on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same, they rested. And they made it a day of feasting and gladness. So they feasted these 3 days. Therefore, the Jews of the villages that were dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day. And here's a little added detail we've never had before. And of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king, 127, of Ahasuerus, both nigh and far. And here's why. To establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly. And so I guess it's still going on over there today. As the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning to a good day, mourning as in sadness, weeping and crying, to a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy. I love these guys. And of sending portions one to another. And it goes on a little bit farther. So they really are picking up the pace, man. I'm seeing this getting bigger and bigger. So of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. I love that part. And the Jews undertook to do so as they had begun and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur. Now, that is the lot to consume them and to destroy them. So they more or less, the way Miss Nancy sees this, they cast lots. It's like rolling dice, anyway, to find out what's going to go on. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he had devised against the Jews, he backed Haman. Remember, he didn't know what was going on exactly. And kings are fools sometimes. We've read about that before. But that they should return upon his own head. In other words, what Haman had set out to do, let it be turned around. And that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur, the dice rolling or the lot casting. Therefore, for all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed, so that's why I say it's still going on today, and upon all such as join themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days, according to the writing, and according to the appointed time each year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout their generations, every family, every province, every city. And that these days of Purim, that's what the holiday is called, should not fail from among the Jews. That's why Miss Nancy said, I'm sure they're still doing it. nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. So they made the feast, and then they made the law to make the feast last forever throughout the generations. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace and truth, to confirm the days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves, for their seed, the matters of their fastings and their cry, and the decree of Esther. And guys, I found this very interesting, Nosy Nancy. Esther was the queen, but she was the one that made this decree or law. So I really found that really interesting. But it confirmed all these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. It's in the book of the Chronicles of the King, which it's written in this book, the Bible, so we can know it. And then King Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land. That's like paying taxes. We have to do that today. And upon the isles of the sea, and all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus. I want to pause right there for a minute and just think, if what Haman had set out to do would have worked, Mordecai wouldn't have been there, Esther wouldn't have been there, none of the people, and the slaughter would have been the exact opposite of what it was. But anyway, of King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of all the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. Oh, how I wish there was peace in Jerusalem today. One day, Jesus is going to come back, and he's going to be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's going to reign on the earth. But guys, to get in on such a good deal, you have to be a Christian. You have to go through Jesus. You have to believe the story that Jesus died on the cross according to the Bible, the scriptures, and that he was buried and rose again the third day according to the scriptures. And then you also have to know you're a sinner. And Miss Nancy paused there because the Bible tells us we're all sinners. We've all come short. So if you believe that, you can be saved. And then someday, if you're faithful to him, you might have your own city, your own country, or you will have a job. And the more he can trust you down here as children to do right, the more he'll trust you then, and you'll be so glad you did. So let's finish this thing. What month did the king's decree get executed throughout the land? You can answer this in one or two or three ways. It was the 12th month, which is Adar over there, which is March here. So if you got any of them, you did really good. What had turned around in the decree? What the enemies of the Jews were going to do to destroy them? Now the Jews held all the power and the rule over them. And could anyone withstand the Jews? No, they could not. What fell on all the people? The fear of the Jews, because they knew now what was going to happen. Who all helped the Jews and why? The rulers of the provinces, the lieutenants, the deputies, and the officers of the king. And the reason is because they feared the Jews. And remember, last time in our last lesson, it said because of the fear of the Jews, many of the people became Jews. So that was cool. Why did Mordecai's fame go throughout the land? Because he kept getting greater and greater in the kingdom. He was the king, Ahasuerus' right-hand man. And what was the weapon that was used in all this destruction that is mentioned? I'm sure there might have been more, but one specific one. A sword. And how many were slain in Shushan the palace? 500 men in that one day. Who did they destroy in Haman's family? How many? 10 people. They were all the sons of Haman. And where was that number brought to? 500 before the king. To him personally, wasn't it? Because he asked about it. So what did the king say to Esther? He told her his report. He said, okay, there was 500 that was killed in the palace, and Haman's 10 sons were killed. But he said, what have they done in the rest of the provinces? So he was reporting to the queen, and Queen Esther was reporting to him, so they know the whole story. That's a wonderful relationship. Excuse me. What did Queen Esther reply? She said, can we do tomorrow like we did today? And we can destroy those 10 of Haman's sons. We want them hung too. So what did the king do? He said yes, and he hung. That's why this story is called 10 hangings and a destruction. But anyway, how many did the Jews slay on the 14th day of Adar, or the month of March? They did 300 in Shushan the palace, but throughout the kingdom, in all the 127 provinces, how many? 75,000. And then Miss Nancy goes back to wonder, because in the first of this story, King Ahasuerus said to Esther, you can have anything up to half of the kingdom. In 127 provinces, Miss Nancy wonders how many was Jews, and if it equaled less than, more than, or whatever. I keep thinking on that, so you babies can too. What did the Jews at Shushan do on the 13th, 14th, and 15th? They rested and feasted 2 days and had joy and gladness. And then what did they do on the third day? They did the same thing, and every day they was having a feast. So what was the other one thing that the Jews did in the villages and in the unwalled cities? They sent portions to one another. They shared their goodness, didn't they? And what did Mordecai send to all the Jews far and near? To establish that the days in that month of the 14th and 15th, which is Purim, that's a holiday, that they should do it each and every year after that, didn't they? What'd they call that? Well, I just busted that one wide open, Purim, didn't they? Who wrote and confirmed this second letter for memorial without fail? Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen. Remember, he gave them that whole family of Haman. So the decree was of Esther, and it was noted that it was written where? In a book. In the Chronicles of the Kings, I guess. Where was all this written and declared about Mordecai and King Ahasuerus advancing him? I gave that one away too. Miss Nancy's answering the question. This should be really easy for you. But who was the guy that was next to King Ahasuerus in the kingdom? Mordecai. And what was the two things that Mordecai was known for? For seeking the wealth of his people, who is the Jews, and speaking peace to all his seed. That just means his family is far extended as it goes. I hope you kids have enjoyed all these lessons about the king and the queen and the kingdom. So I'm glad we got to do it. But remember, you get to do something. He can use you. You don't have to be a king or a queen. You can tell that by Miss Nancy. If I can do something, you guys can too. Go out and tell the world about Jesus. We are the light of the world, guys. I'm trusting you to do that. I'll see you next time. Bye, kids.